This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
All right. Welcome everyone who just started watching us. I forgot to click record. Please see Cassie Eckhoff's Fine Minutes in about a month for the early part of our meeting. Okay, Tom, you have something to add regarding ADUs?
Just real quick, if you all remember Chris Lee, and I don't know if he's alive and well somewhere, but Chris is the one who, his company put that small house in our neighborhood, my neighborhood. At the time when Chris was doing his research, I understood him to say he had identified 100 lots in Easthampton that could potentially support ADU.
Yeah. He's still sending out his newsletter regularly from Maine and Easthampton, Northampton areas, all parts of Western Mass and Maine. So,
yep.
Chris, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, he had identified 100 something potential detached ADUs.
Right.
Got it. Okay. All right. So that's something that we can monitor. I can put that on a list to follow up on semi-regularly. Paul.
I just think one thing that would be interesting to know would be if anyone had come to the planning department or whoever who was interested in building an ADU or something like that, but was unable to because of some part of, the rules or the regulation or like the size restrictions or anything. Like if there's any issues that people have going about the process, I think that would be interesting to know and to learn, to have that information. So I'm not asking you what that has been, but just if that comes up or anything, I think it'd be good for us to know.
Yeah. So that's something that we could maybe use to strengthen our relationship with the building inspector, because if it sounds like that data system will be more and more up to speed over the next few years. So we'll be able to probably have a conversation with her about that. Okay, cool. All right. On February 7th will be the second public hearing regarding the Sierra Vista Commons proposed development at the former Tasty Talk site. Not expecting it to be all fairy dust and unicorns. There's a lot of frustration about this proposal in not just the perceived public sphere of Facebook, but at the first public hearing, and there was also a very large congregation of people at what was supposed to be the second hearing, but they asked for an extension. So I read our letter. There are many widely varying concerns about the proposal. A lot of them I totally understand, not just from like a psychology perspective, but a effect on the environment, effect on traffic. I get all of those things. So I'm interested to the extent that you guys have been paying attention yourselves, whether we would like to bring another formal EDIC statement to the February 7th public hearing. If there are particular things you would like to hone in on, if someone is just itching to be our public representative, I'm happy to do it. And also, if you would like to do it, I hand you the reins. I just want to open up that conversation. Tom Brown.
When I'm hoping you might be able to attend and speak again, because as you said, there's probably about 100 people in the room and 5 people who might be speaking in favor of the project. I do plan to speak at this one. I did not at the first one. I will identify myself as a resident and a member of EDIC. Obviously, I'm not speaking on behalf of EDIC, but I will be speaking in support of the project. Not sure what else to say. I'm going to try to cover a lot of bases. I mean, these guys they're putting the stuff where it's supposed to go based on zoning. They're putting housing in residential zoning. They're putting business in business zoning. unfortunately, and as you said, we kind of understand the folks that aren't happy about it. But I haven't yet seen, even with traffic, I haven't yet seen a compelling reason that, oh my God, this shouldn't go there. People talk about conservation, they're talking about wetlands, they're talking, and believe me, even if they get past the planning board, they've got to get through all that other stuff too. So it's not a carte blanche for them to go ahead with the project once they get past the planning board. Even they've got to go through conservation, historical might be involved. So they're going to go through all the hoops they need to go through. And I think in the long run, a lot of what I'm hearing is probably what people heard back in the 60s and 70s when the southern section of town was developed with all those homes. And oh my God, our city's going to change. And I don't think our city's any worse off for the development of the plains. And I don't think we'll be any worse off for the development of this parcel.
Paul.
I just want to say that I agree with Tom that there's a lot of people who might oppose it now, but later on they'll be like, "Oh, this was great. This is a good part of our community." I did notice that the future Starbucks has started to go up, and that was part of that parcel that got kind of split off and sold to Starbucks, but was on the old Tasty Top parcel. And looking at it, I could see how there could be a concern with traffic. They might need to do something to the road or change some infrastructure. And it was kind of hard. It's hard to imagine like the number of cars that would be coming out of that thing, like if they had gymnastics or indoor soccer or whatever they want to do there. But I think that it is important for people to understand that this is only really the beginning of this process. And the plans that we've seen or has been proposed is not like a set in stone concrete thing. This is a changeable, malleable proposal that's going to go through all these phases. It's going to go through environmental and the traffic study. And so I think if we come out here and we say we support this, people should understand that we're not saying that we support doing this blind, that we support doing this with all the due diligence, going forward.
Yeah, I agree with that, Paul. And before I let Cassie talk, something on the topic of the traffic and the fact that it is set along Route 10, which is not really our bailiwick, that is the bailiwick of the state highway department. I'm thoughtful about how we could represent the interests of safety and wanting to be a more walkable, bikeable community in future conversations with the state about, because it sounds like they're already starting to talk about what needs to happen to Route 10 to make it a more reasonable place to drive your car. And what would it like? That also entails thinking about public transportation and how available it is, and how do you drive up ridership, and all of these things have started to swirl around my head as things that we could reasonably be similarly enthusiastic about in a very public way. And I wonder the extent to which we bring those to people's attention in our advocacy for this kind of development or not. Cassie, your turn.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I'm wondering if we can put forward concepts that we would hope that the community would incorporate in the development. Like you're saying, walkability. I'm thinking sustainability, solar panels, blah, 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 blah. If it had an zero carbon imprint, that would be a very cool thing to get behind.
Sure. That sounds hard, but yes, it would be extremely delightful to get behind something like that. And I feel like those kinds of proposals are few and far between, but what do I know? Okay. Alexis, member of the community, what have you got to share / question?
Hi, I actually happen to be the Mass Bike rep for the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. And
cool.
I can validate that in I believe the year 27, they have on the queue to update Route 10. And I think it's mostly sidewalks and bike lanes. But myself, I would love a bike lane that went all the way up Route 10 so you could get to the post office, you get to Abishan, you get to the co-op, and then connect back down to O'Neill. So this is a broader conversation, but if anyone wants to contact me on this topic, that's what I'm supposed to be advocating for.
Well, dang, I'm delighted that you joined us today, Elaine.
Yay.
Jeff Bag, what you got?
Thanks. I guess I would just offer something nuanced, which is, and I guess it's counterintuitive, which is how, like what Alexis just said, like there's a Mass DOT has a long list of roads that need improvement, and there's never enough money to pay for all the road improvements that need to happen. So they go through a pretty regimented way to prioritize projects. So currently that project is out at 2027, but there's no funding attached to it yet. So it's on the list, which is good. What we do know is that Mass DOT is picking up the design of this project. So they're going to start their process. And it's a sad reality is that with 2 pedestrian deaths on the road, that has pushed up the concern about the road has risen because of that. And what we know is that Mass DOT initiated a pedestrian improvement project because of that, which is like, it's not to minimize it, but they're talking about 3 crosswalks located along the stretch, basically from West Street to the end. And that's kind of in direct response to the fatalities and the concern about people crossing Route 10. And then they have this bigger project, which is sort of the full look at all aspects of Route 10. And the counterintuitive part of what I'm seeing is that a large project that we presume has some benefits to the city. So we're talking, 54 affordable units, commercial growth, plus the market rate units, that actually has an effect to drive that design faster. I'm not in a Mass DOT, I can't make any guarantees, but those 2 things combined take our road amongst 100 and rise it up on the list. And, with the project getting approved, it would really push Mass DOT to advance this project faster to meet timelines of other things going on. Without the project being approved, it kind of is going to dip back down, and it's going to kind of go into like the other 80 roads that are, in similar conditions. So there's a little bit of something counterintuitive about this, which is that a project that could make it worse with traffic will actually raise the whole project up in importance, and priority. And so the tricky part that we haven't figured out, the planning board is really still in information gathering. That there's like a lot of public input, and that's their job, is to collect the public input. So we haven't gotten to this next step of the process, which is sifting through all that and kind of figuring out what would be the potential impact, and is there a solution to it. So like environmental, they have the Conservation Commission, design, and characteristics, that should all get fleshed out. And then there's traffic. So they actually, for a couple different reasons, really want to get the planning board permit granted so that they can show Mass DOT that they have a real project and that they're worth Mass DOT spending time and energy to speed up the project. And then the other reason that they really need the planning board approval at the early stage is to try to get the affordable housing tax credits that almost every affordable unit in a bigger project gets funded through these tax credit programs, and they need the planning board permit to really enter into that realm. So the city, and what we're going to try to be doing, is make sure the planning board has the ability to grant the permit with conditions. And the conditions would be that whatever Mass DOT would require for upgrades is what the developer will have to do, because the planning board can say they put in a light, but the planning board doesn't get to dictate when a light gets put on a Mass DOT roadway. So we haven't gotten there yet. I think February 7th is gonna be a lot more input. And then at a subsequent meeting, we will start to map out the options for the planning board to try to navigate some of this. But so that's the counterintuitive part, is that with the project, Mass DOT is more likely to pay attention and speed it up, and without the project, they're more likely to just kind of deal with it on a different schedule. So navigating that is going to be a little tricky, but that's something I just wanted to share with this group. And, eventually I'm going to share that with the planning board. It just hasn't been the right opportunity. There's been so much public comment so far. So I figured I'd share that with you guys and see if that's helpful.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I thought you were going to share something counterintuitive and depressing, but that's counterintuitive and exciting. Okay. Well, so what I didn't do is draft something that we can all approve here tonight to go say. I feel like I need some more time to refine what I was going to say. What do you want to do about an official EDIC statement?
Didn't we already had that statement we agreed on last meeting?
Yeah, I don't really want to read the exact same thing again. I'd like to add to the conversation.
One thing I might suggest is go into the meeting and verbally saying that the EDIC is paying attention, following along, and looks forward to contributing more comments as the project unfolds, just to maybe let the planning board members know that there are people who will support, in theory at least, support the concept of the project moving forward. That might be a way to just remind them that you're still there, and that because we're expecting a revision to the project to be described on February 7th. Nothing substantial. I mean, it's not going to be drastically different, but they owe the planning board an update, and then everyone's got to digest that, and it'll come back at the next meeting. And so that might be one way for the EDIC to just be there and say something, which is that you're planning on providing additional comments, in the future.
Okay, that's useful. Can people live with that? All right, I'll go and say something like that. All right, new business.
Wait,
a very brief thing.
Sorry. Can we say that, but also say that we hope that it incorporates walkability, considers public train, the more ethereal things?
Folks, what do you think? Are you on board with having?
It may not be the time.
I mean, I can also say, here's the part endorsed by EDIC, and here's what Gwen as an individual wants. I can say those two things separately.
I'm not sure I understand.
Meaning I can say, here's the statement that EDIC is, as a group, endorses.
Right.
Say the thing. And here's what I, as an individual, also am in favor of.
Is it just you?
Well, unless all of you show up with me. Tom?
I think back to what Jeff was saying, and maybe Alexis, is that the walkability piece, or the bikeability piece, if that's a word, that's probably in the purview of what DOT might put for conditions on the project. I mean, we can favor that stuff, but it's not our road, unfortunately. So we can't even encourage the developer to do it, because they can't do it without DOT approval, I'm assuming, Jeff.
Yeah, and I think one of the details that maybe Cassie would, if you leave the road, the roadway is definitely what Mass DOT is in charge of. And then when you get inside the property, maybe that was what Cassie was saying, is walkability within the property. And I know that last time they did talk about it, that there's a continuous sidewalk that runs through the whole project to provide the walk. If you live in the upper area, you could walk on a sidewalk to the road. The solar panels, I know this is all the last meeting when they kind of asked for the continuance, they were going to present information. And one of the things that was in the memo is that they are going to provide solar panels as part of the project. So I think one of the nuanced things is that the building code is what they have to meet. And the building code does require certain energy efficiency measures. So I think that they are saying that they're going to meet what the building code requires. I think the hardest part right now will be above and beyond what's required. And so that's going to be, it's usually a financial impact where they have to meet this building code, and then going above that without a grant or a subsidy or some other funding mechanism to fund that, that's where they'll respond to that. But to the maximum extent practicable, like things like that you're suggesting they try, I do think that they're going to start addressing what they can and can't do, to the planning board at least. But I think it's really hard for a developer to absorb net zero without having planned for that. So it's like above and beyond what's required. I think those are going to be the things that are going to get harder for the developer to respond to. So Cassie, I don't know if I was hitting on anything that you were asking about.
Yeah, you answered it. I retract my comment.
Paul.
I was just going to say that just to be cautious when we're saying that, we are interested in these different concepts, that people who might be from the public who are watching this don't get confused about us saying that these things that we would like to see are actually part of the proposal that is on the table. So if we say, oh, we would love this project, we support this project, and we would love to see this project be net zero, somebody might take that to mean, oh, they're saying this is supposed to be a net zero you know what I mean? So things like that, just to be cautious that the things that we're saying that we like about the project are things that are actually like on the table that they've said they want to do. You know?
I think that we can be advocates for things like as low environmental impact as practicable, given what the context of the site is, et cetera. In the grand scheme of things, EDIC is in favor of a walkable city, is in favor of bike lanes, is in favor of being able to get around. We talk about parking and cars regularly. So that's something that I think that if I said it generally, EDIC would be like, yeah, in general, yes.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to offer up. And also, building 3 should look like this one with solar panels. So
yeah, I guess what I'm just saying is, if we're going to say it's more walkable, like what does that mean? What does that look like for this? Like if we're going to put a whole bunch of units there, that's not a very walkable area. There's not a sidewalk on that street, I don't think. Maybe
right, and that's the conversation about what might happen to Route 10. If you put in sidewalks, it could become possible to safely walk from that development to the center of town. Whereas right now you're walking on a highway. Chris.
I think it's fair to say, based on how much conversation we're having about it, it's going to be happening between the developer and planning. And I think that I agree you should say something, but I don't think that it's going to make much of a difference either way, to be honest. It's going to happen either way, that conversation.
Sure. All right. I'm going to move us on from that unless somebody cannot live with stopping talking about Tasty Top. Okay, Municipal Academy is a thing dreamed up by Connie Denham and Omar Gomez, and frankly, guys, they roped me into it. So it is an effort to do something similar to what the city did maybe 5 or 6 years ago. There was like an all whoever wanted to participate experience at the high school in the cafeteria area, with some breakout groups where there was some graphic note taking, and you could move to learn about committees and boards in the city, and you could learn about Robert's Rules of Order and all that. We're going to do something like that, but more specific about the departments themselves that exist in the city, tied to where does my tax money go? How does the budget work in this city? If you are interested in helping plan that, you do not have to be volunteering to run anything, but if you're interested in helping plan it, please let me know. I would value your participation in helping plan it. More heads, better than less heads. All right, that topic is over. I will bring up just this. I'm going to flip this thing about housing, the second one first. The city study of housing regarding public schools. The city is commissioning a study of how housing can affect the demographics of our school population. I think this is pretty useful given what we heard from Paul at our last meeting. So that, I believe, is coming. Now, Airbnb zoning. Jeff, I feel like this is something that got floated to us and we said, you know what, we're going to deal with this in January. Is that something that came from your brain? Because it's something that we've talked about historically. And then somebody mentioned that perhaps there was a snafu. Was it your brain, Chris? Whose brain brought up Airbnb zoning?
I remember us talking about it for sure. I
Mhm.
don't know who brought it up.
Well, it wasn't me. Somebody put it on somebody said, let's talk about it in January. They said it like in September or October. Something about as we move forward, thinking about zoning, what might be some of our issues. If we don't want to talk about it, we don't want to talk about it. J-Bag.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut off Paul. I think it's a topic worthy of conversation. It just might be a little early still, and maybe this was me. I think that there was a question about how does our zoning treat an Airbnb? Because it's our zone. Let's say in the best case scenario, our zoning was created in 1995. We're not really in the best case scenario, by the way. So it was created pre-95. Airbnb was like not really a thing. So our zoning hasn't caught up to Airbnb. Right now, generally speaking, the position is that you can do an Airbnb just like you can do a single family house, which means there's no zoning approval process. That's the current kind of interpretation with the building department. And that's fine because it allows the flexibility that you might expect. The conversation that is starting to happen is it's more than just zoning. So it's about life safety requirements. So generally when you say life safety, it lumps in like the health department, the fire department, and the building department. If you have like an apartment building, multifamily, they do annual inspections, or they're supposed to do annual inspections to check for the life safety requirements. So smoke detectors and sprinklers and things like that. I could imagine in the next year there being a citywide conversation about how does the city want to handle Airbnbs, and I think the health department is involved and the other departments to figure out if there's an inspectional process or a registration that we would, as a city, we would require. And the building inspector and I chatted about this fairly recently, and she was kind of the opinion that might be a better way to go than to try to wrangle it through zoning. But so I would say sometime in the next year, I think this should come up as a conversation. I think EDIC should be at the table when it comes up. But I know other communities are starting to grapple with this. And the big decision is, do we create a registration system and focus on getting like an inspector in once a year, or do we try to wrangle it all through zoning and get like a special permit? And ironically, we just spent like a couple of years taking out the special permit for certain things. So, we would have that kind of conversation about it. But I see lots of hands, so I'll stop now.
Holy smokes. Paul.
Okay. When I think about Airbnb, there are probably more, but I think of like two different kinds of properties or Airbnbs. There are the kinds that are like investors will buy a house or build a house or whatever, and they'll rent that out on Airbnb, and that'll bring them investment revenue. And then there are people who have a part of their home that they will rent out, whether it's a single room, or if they have like an in-law apartment, but they don't have an in-law, or like I have a neighbor who built a whole like basement living area for her boyfriend's kids, and then her boyfriend cheated on her, so she kicked him out, and now she rents it out as an Airbnb. And I just want to make sure that as we go and have these conversations, that we protect the people who are just like renting out a room in their home, or people like my neighbor, who are not ruining the housing market by buying up a bunch of housing stock and turning that into rental properties, and charging exorbitant rates because they're on Airbnb.
Good point. David Kutcher.
I was discussing this with a few other people recently, but it's interesting that many communities have not really embraced Airbnbs in general. So Airbnbs are kind of like an underground market for housing, essentially. But one of the things we were discussing was if it would be interesting if a municipality really did embrace it and say, like, yes, we're going to do regulations, not New York City style, but regulations where you have to register. But at the same time, part of that is figuring out a way to also use that to promote, encourage registry, like promote the city of Easthampton and say, like, here are some options for, because we don't really have hotels and motels in Easthampton. Like, we've kind of managed to skip that, but at the same time, especially when it comes to the major events that come, into the 5 colleges, it can be that lucrative sense and bring people to the town from a economic standpoint of saying, hey, stay at one of our Airbnbs and explore our downtown, explore all the restaurants and everything else as a promotional part of why you should actually come to Easthampton. So a little bit of both, making sure they're up to code and safe, but also use that to promote as well.
Yeah, interesting. I wish Mo were here to think through that with us. She'll be here next month, I'm sure. Other thoughts about this? What should we bring this topic? Should we wait to bring up this topic again, Jeff? Is there like an obvious thing you're thinking of? Or is this something that we should have periodic discussions about anyway, regardless of some event that's coming up or some conversation that's more formal?
What I would say is that, it turns out that I am the chairperson of a group of regional planners. So like a bunch of planning department staff members in the Pioneer Valley meet quarterly, and I convene them with the help of PVPC. We're meeting on February 9th as that group, and one of our topics is Airbnbs. And so I guess my hope out of that meeting for me personally is just get a sense of where the communities around us are with dealing with Airbnbs. And then at the February meeting, I think it would come after, right? Your next meeting is February 21st. So maybe I could provide this group with a little update. It won't be problem solved and solutions in hand, but it might give us a little bit of a step in a direction to figure out, kind of all the things that everyone discusses, how I don't know yet the best way that Easthampton figures this out, but we could be starting the conversation. And I think the one thing that didn't come up, and I know like the Berkshires in particular they're ahead of us with this. And then Franklin Council Regional Governments. So it's like the PVPC equivalent in Franklin County has had some information sessions and I think they have like a guide that they've handed out to Franklin County towns. So a little bit might be information gathering at this stage, and then provide it back. I think the biggest thing that hasn't been addressed is like the impact to neighbors. So I think some communities, when you have the horror stories of like Cape Cod, that, the house is just in constant rotation of people who have no regard for the property kind of thing or their neighborhood. So the neighborhood impact is something to consider too, to kind of balance out what David was saying is about allowing it, but then understanding what it would be like to live next to one, basically. So all those things get put into that big bucket of stuff. So maybe I'll speak again at the next meeting and just give a quick update.
Okay, great. Thanks. Alexis.
I just wanted to put my 2 cents in as a consumer. I've had friends who wanted to visit from either the Boston area or out of state, and there's not a lot of Airbnbs here at all. And one had a set of dogs and the other one had children, and most of your traditional bread and breakfasts here don't take either. And so I think, one of them ended up just coming out for a day, and the other one had to rent a hotel by the highway. Neither is like feeling very, warm and inviting. So I strongly, I know Airbnb has been a problem, and I know all the problems you're talking about, but as a consumer, I would love if you embraced Airbnb as a community. And I've considered, the part of the reason I was interested in the ADUs, I've considered getting a lot, adding a small unit and trying to set up an Airbnb. This is kind of more me just dreaming. I don't actually have the money for that, but that's why I'm interested in this stuff.
Thanks for that perspective. David Kutcher.
I just want to clarify, I'm not one for more government regulation in general, but I think we have the opportunity to, create a bigger marketing plan and development part that can be funded in a way and self-funded by that type of minor regulation of both for the consumer, but also use that to promote. And I think in that it becomes a win-win situation for both aspects of that marketplace. And again, it's kind of weird that we would be situating ourselves in the marketplace. Maybe that is the Chamber of Commerce and that's their role. But I think that, being able to drive people here is kind of under this umbrella organization or committee or whatever we are. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks. Okay, so we will look forward to an update from Jeff on the regional planners conversation about this and continue to think as necessary and of interest. My closing thoughts are, if you are interested in what the deal is with the library, pay attention to what comes out or go to the city council meeting tomorrow. Starts at 6. I will filter you some information as I can find it. If you want to do the municipal academy planning with me, would love to hang out with you. I'm trying to make meetings 1 hour long and rare. So do I have more to say about that? I probably don't. Jeff Bagg.
I'm really sorry because you just talked about how making your meeting short and getting done. One thing that occurred to me under the planning department update, there is something going to city council that I guess I wanted to make the EDIC aware of this. So for a couple of years, the planning department has talked about reorganization a little bit. And part of that is that several people in the planning department have been here for a while and are at the end of their pay scale. So like we have this scale that goes out, and when you get to the end, you just get to the end, and then you don't get any annual increases. You sometimes get a cost of living adjustment, but that's been really sporadic. So a couple of people have asked about either changing titles or getting that scale extended so that people who have been here can stay here and kind of keep getting that scale. The assistant planner position is going to change, is proposed to change to a senior planner position. And then we have an arts coordinator that is proposed to go to a program director. So we have ECA is a pretty highly functioning group. And so those two positions are proposed to change so that they can get access to that scale. And the city planner position is really a holdover from 1995 when the town became a city. The position was described as city planner. So through this discussion, I've also ended up with a proposed title as the director. So looking around the other departments, the health director, DPW director, and on down the line, the people at the department head level are all have the title of directors. It's going to get submitted to council this week, and then it goes to some subcommittees and goes back out for a full city council hearing. Maybe the EDIC might say something positive about the planning department at one of these. And I realized I didn't think of this ahead of time. And we can continue to discuss it maybe at your next meeting, but it is something I didn't want anyone on this to hear about that at council. And it was just occurring to me that it's going to get proposed. So it's been in the works for a couple of years, but it is going to pop up on Wednesday. So anyway, shameless plug for the planning department.
So we're part of your get a raise negotiation. We thinking that you're nice and good and useful.
Well, the way I propose it is that the director position is not changing. So I'm not asking for a raise. I'm just asking for the title. And then the other people in my department wanted to have that scale kind of elongate. And, like Councilor Riss has talked about this. It's like the idea of keeping people here for like long term. This really needs to happen so that there's a continuous normal cost of living increase for those people. And that's a good way to keep good people around.
Okay.
It's important for everybody. So anyway, I just figured I'd throw that out there. It just occurred to me at the last minute that that's going to come up this week.
This week, tomorrow.
It gets submitted and then it gets discussed at a subcommittee at some other date.
Got it. Okay. So in the future, you would like us to attend to that?
Maybe.
Okay.
Just wanted to put it out there.
All right. Very good. Thanks for letting us know. I don't think there's anything else to say, but stop me if you disagree. All right. Do I have a motion to close this meeting?
So moved.
Second? Chris Korchik. Oh my gosh, great. Any further discussion of closing the meeting or anything else in this meeting? No? All in favor of getting out of here?
Aye.
Aye. Great to meet you, Alexis. Thanks for coming, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. I'll see you in the future. Bye.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.